Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks. Update 40 has a lot of changes, some big and some small, but this video will cover the important ones so that you are all caught up for the new patch. The biggest new addition to the game is the Endless Archive. For me, this is the most exciting new thing they've added to the game in years. I've already had so much fun playing through it on the PTS, so I can't wait for y'all to get a chance to check it out. This is an entirely new game mode in ESO. The design of it is similar to a roguelike, and you can go through it either solo with a companion, or as a duo with another player. So I won't get too into the details of how the archive works here in this video, but I do have a tips and tricks video in the works that should be out in a couple of weeks. But I will be streaming the Endless Archive on launch day for PC, so feel free to pop in and ask any questions if you do have any. There are a bunch of rewards that come from the archive that I will cover in this video, so let's start with one of the key things to collect from the archive, the new class sets. First up is Basalt Blooded Warrior. This is the Dragonite set. It covers the Earthen Heart skill line. Casting an Earthen Heart ability grants you a rock stance for 10 seconds, while on your primary weapon you gain Molten Stance, granting you major heroism, generating 3 ultimate every 1.5 seconds, while you're on your secondary weapon you gain Obsidian Stance, increasing your healing done and damage shields by 14%. Bar swapping will swap your stance automatically. This is a good set. It's easy to trigger and keep up, and if you have it as an always active set, you get the benefit of one bonus or the other depending on which bar you're on. But if you want to run it as a single bar set, if you front bar it, whenever you proc that major heroism, since it is on that 10-second timer, it will carry over while you're on your back bar like a traditional proc set would. And then you just wouldn't be able to refresh it while you're on your back bar since the 5 piece is not active there. And then the same with the 14% increased healing done and damage shields if you wanted to back bar the set only. If that's the only bonus of this you're really worried about getting, once activated, that buff will carry over to your front bar so you could have it active at all times on both bars. So I just think overall this set was designed really well. There's a lot of different configurations that you can run with this depending on exactly what you want to get out of it. Really strong and versatile set. Next up is Nobility and Decay. This is the Necromancer set that covers the Bone Tyrant skill line. Casting a Bone Tyrant ability while in combat grants you Beautiful Corpse and Death's Favor for 16 seconds. Death's Favor increases your healing taken and reduces damage taken by 12% based on your missing health. This can occur every 20 seconds and is reduced by 2 seconds for each slotted Bone Tyrant ability. Casting a Corpse Consumer ability consumes Beautiful Corpse, treating you as a corpse. So this one's pretty cool too. I definitely like the idea of not only the damage reduction increasing as you get lower in health, but then also you get that healing taken increase, which affects not only your heals on yourself, but others' heals on you as well. And then you can also use yourself as a corpse for your abilities which require a corpse. So with the tether ability, it will just tether to yourself and the effect will follow you around. So it is a pretty good set. It's definitely come a long way since week 1 of the PTS. Next up is Soul Cleaver. This is the Nightblade set, and it focuses on the siphoning skill line. Increases the damage and healing of siphoning abilities by 18%, reduces the cost of siphoning abilities by 18%, and casting siphoning abilities drains you of 1 ultimate. So this one is okay. I think they could just get rid of that last line altogether. It's really not strong enough to warrant having a negative effect on it as well. So looking at this set from a DPS perspective, it makes Swallow Soul and Sap Essence both hit pretty hard, and it also boosts the healing that those provide, and then it will boost the damage of Debilitate and the healing that you get from your siphoning strikes. So lots of additional incoming heals with this, but it's definitely not going to compete damage wise with your traditional DPS sets. But if you are running solo and you want some additional survivability, or especially if you're doing a 1-bar setup where you're heavily focused into this skill line already, I could see this being useful for some people. But for group play, I just don't really see this one being too popular. Next up is Monolith of Storms. This is the Sorcerer set. It focuses on the Storm Calling skill line. So I actually won't cover this one too in depth here since I already did a full feedback and review video on this. So make sure to check that one out if you are interested in learning a bit more about how this one works. But personally, I think this is the worst class set that was introduced. I can't think of a single reason to use it over other DPS sets. It was also the one that did not get adjusted at all based on feedback on the PTS, except for a fix for a bug where it wasn't critically striking. So I'm hoping down the road that they will make this one a little bit more appealing, because as it is now, it's not too great. Next up, we have the Templar set, Wrath Sun. This focuses on the Dawn's Wrath skill line. When you deal damage with the Dawn's Wrath ability, you gain a stack of sunlight for 10 seconds. Once per attack, you can have 40 stacks max and gain 12 magicka recovery per stack. When at max stacks, Dawn's Wrath abilities deal 25% bonus damage, and a Wrathful Nova is cast on the enemy, but you cannot refresh sunlight. When sunlight expires at max stacks, you lose 50% of your current magicka. So this set has a few problems. The 10-second timer is going to be really annoying for a lot of situations because if you don't get to that 40 stacks within a specific encounter, you have a very short window to get to the next set of enemies before it falls off and you have to start over. And even within some encounters, there are times when 10 seconds can go by with no enemy to damage. So I just really like to see them greatly increase this timer or get rid of it altogether. Another issue here is that the Nova drops automatically at 40 stacks, and since many of the stacks generated are coming from dots ticking, it could end up placed in a terrible spot. So I do wish there was a more efficient trigger condition, so once you hit that 40 stacks, like a bash or something to proc it on the desired target. And then there's that huge magicka dump on the last line there. I'm not really sure why they felt the need to put a big curse on this set. It's not overpowered compared to other options, so why have a big negative drawback to go along with it? It just seems kind of weird. I think they could scrap that altogether and the set would still just be kind of like pretty good, but not a must-run set or anything like that. But all that said, even with all the drawbacks, it is still a pretty decent option. I've seen a nice 131k parse already on the trial dummy, and one interesting thing that won't show up for single target fights, if you want to use the reflective light morph instead of Vampire's Bane, this hits 3 enemies instead of 1 and gives you 3 stacks on that initial hit, along with another 3 stacks every 2 seconds when the dot ticks on each of the enemies. So with 3 enemies and using this as a dot on them, this alone gets you to 36 stacks in just 22 seconds. So that will be much faster with other abilities going as well. So I think it'll definitely need to be tested out for certain AoE scenarios. For single target, it does okay, but the stacks definitely build up much slower. Overall, I think it's an interesting set. The whole concept of it is pretty good, and with just a few tweaks, it could be a really great option for Templars. Next up is Gardener of the Seasons. This is the Warden set, and it focuses on the Green Balance skill line. Gain Herald of Spring, causing your Green Balance overheals to apply minor heroism for 3 seconds. Casting a heal ability while bracing consumes Herald of Spring and gives you Harbinger of Fall for 6 seconds, causing your Green Balance overheals to create an 8-meter area for 5 seconds, applying Major Cowardice to enemies and Minor Vitality to allies. You can create an area once every 5 seconds. When Harbinger of Fall ends, regain Herald of Spring. So this one is pretty cool. I'm glad they adjusted it to be a bit more straightforward compared to the early iteration of this. So just healing with the Green Balance skill as normal will give minor heroism, and if you are getting ready for a defensive period, you can just do the same thing while blocking and it puts the Major Cowardice up. I don't really know if I see this making its way into the PvE meta, but it could definitely be a fun set for Warden healers and tanks depending on what kind of content that you're running and what your group ends up looking like. And then finally, we have Reawakened Hierophant. This is the Arcanist set, and it focuses on a Curative Runeform skill line. So casting a non-ultimate Curative Runeform ability grants an effect for 6 seconds to your effective allies based on how many Crux you had. At 1 Crux, your allies gain a damage shield that absorbs 3618 damage. At 2 Crux, allies gain minor heroism, granting 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds. And at 3 Crux, allies gain major protection, reducing damage taken by 10%. So I think the buffs on this are pretty interesting too. On-demand major protection is a nice one to have for the group, but similar to the Warden set, I don't know how many situations I see this one being squeezed in for, but I think it could possibly be an interesting option if you are trying to play a bit more defensively. So that's it for the class sets, but alongside of those, we're also getting a ton of new other stuff like achievements and titles. There are 77 new achievements and 3 new titles in this update, and then there will be a new mount, a malographic mount that's available after collecting and using 50 malographic Ikers and completing the Iker Most Malevolent achievement. So it did seem like when I was doing these on the PTS that these dropped as the reward for doing the daily quest for completing just 1 arc, and also had a small chance to drop randomly inside the archive as well. Then there's also a malographic skeever pet available after collecting and using 25 disgusting spoils and completing the scheming skeevers achievement. So I did see these randomly dropping within the archive as well. Then there are also multiple sets of face and body mark markings, a ton of other collectibles to pick up in here. And then there's a new vendor that has a rotating stock. It's similar to the golden vendor in Cyrodiil. It even has some leads for antiquities. So all this is purchasable in here with the new currency that you earn in the archive. With the update, they're also introducing a bunch of new antiquities, 31 in total for the update, and many of these are found in the Endless Archive. Also a new Tales of Tribute patron deck, and this is also found in the Endless Archive. For quality of life stuff, they have a new group finder tool. This will help form groups for pretty much any activity that you want, and there are a lot of ways you can set up the group finder to filter out candidates. So this should be pretty nice for those that want to work on specific tasks and don't mind running with random people to do so. Much better than coordinating in zone chat. Next, they have the Grandmaster crafting stations. Are you proud of your enormous collection of item set stations, but find yourself frustrated by how much space and furnishing count they take up? Have you ever wished there was a way to take the dozens and dozens of set stations for a trade skill and squish them together into a single all-in-one station? Well, good news. 4 new top-tier crafting stations to consume your attuned crafting stations and host them in a unified space are coming to your local Alliance furniture. So each of these can be purchased for 1,500 RIP vouchers, and they did change up the achievement requirement there from the initial one that was posted in week 1. But overall, these are just a big win. I think people are going to love these to free up a ton of space for those that were collecting all of those attunable stations. There is also a jewelry crafting rebalance. I did go over this in further detail in a previous video if you want more specifics, but essentially they are doing away with the grains altogether. Each grain will become a plating, and each existing plating will become 10 platings. You'll now need 8 platings to upgrade to gold instead of 4, but with those adjustments, that's still only 20% of the previous materials required. Master crafting writs are being rebalanced to account for this huge change to the cost of craft, but existing crafting writs will be unchanged. So to go along with that, they are reducing the prices of the wares from the golden vendor, and the overland jewelry will now cost 125k gold or 225k AP, and then the dungeon jewelry will be 200k gold or 375k AP. There's also some improved daily quest rewards for Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, and Undaunted. And then they made updates to quest XP and gold rewards. So they've standardized a lot of the quest types to be a bit more consistent with what you'd expect to earn. So I think overall these are some pretty solid changes here. And there will be new homes and new furnishings coming at some point during update 40. All right, for the final section of this video, I'll go over the combat and balance changes. So this was a pretty light patch for balance, but there's still some pretty important stuff to cover here. So they updated many ally and group targeted player abilities to no longer target pets. So these improvements will help ensure that pets are no longer stealing buffs that should be going to players. And they adjusted the following ultimate abilities to affect up to 12 targets rather than only 6. So the idea here was barrier goes to 12 targets. That's a really widely used defensive ultimate. So maybe these other defensive ultimates would be a bit more popular if they also worked that way. Now, Gibbering Shelter was already pretty popular even with that limitation, so when they had this go to all group members, it ended up being a bit too strong for their liking, and they did nerf it midway through the PTS. So now the ally targeted shield can only trigger once every 4 seconds rather than every 1 second. So it will go to all of your allies every 4 seconds instead of only 6 every 1 second. So it's still a nerf overall from how it is on live, but maybe not quite as bad as it might initially seem if you just see the 1 second down to 4 seconds. If you're talking about a 12-person group, it is still a nerf though for sure. There wasn't really much else with the Arcanists, but Dragonites did get some pretty interesting changes. For the Ardent Flame skill line, Inferno, this ability and its morph's passive slotted bonuses now persist through bar swap, so that Major Prophecy and Savagery will now be active on both of your bars. This really helps to add some more flexibility in the bar setups, especially when paired with this next change, Molten Whip. The Seething Fury stacking bonus from this morph now operates as a slotted passive bonus that persists through bar swap rather than only on the bar that the ability is slotted on. Seething Fury now requires you to be in combat to gain stacks to mitigate pre-buffing and burst potential. So the last part there kind of sucks. No more casting 3 Flames of Oblivion right before combat to get all your stacks. But the first part, it no longer matters which bar you have your Ardent Flame skills on to build up your whip stacks. So this one and getting that crit chance from Flames of Oblivion now working on both bars. There are so many ways you can set up your skills on your DK and get really good results now. I did a ton of parses on the PTS DPS already, and I'll be sharing those very soon. Just an insane amount of setups. Every one of these here was over 120k DPS, so I'll have the DK build page on my website updated first out of all the classes, but I'll be working on getting them all done as soon as possible for update 40. And then finally for Dragonites, they nerfed corrosive armor, so this morph now disables ultimate generation while the ability is active. The magma shell morph was not touched, but with corrosive you'll now have to wait until your ultimate is done before you can start generating ult again. For sorcerers, they fixed a bug with crystal fragments. This ability's special activation now properly applies the crystal weaver bonus after activating, so this is the cost reduction that the skill should have been providing. And then for the unstable clan fear, they reduced the cost of this ability's active cast to 4320, down from 4500. For Templars, Radiant Glory, this morph now also grants Magicka Restore when it deals damage, which is based on the missing health of the enemy up to a maximum of 480 per tick. So this is really nice for Templar sustain, especially for those stamina Templars who may have really struggled to sustain the execute here. And then for Restoring Aura, this ability and its morph's passive slotted bonuses now persist through bar swap, so that's just another skill that got that nice quality of life bonus to work on both bars. For Wardens, they got their Permafrost ultimate nerfed, reduced the damage per tick of this morph by approximately 60% to make up for the Glacial Presence passive being buffed, as this morph, despite its existing damage reductions, still did more damage than Northern Storm. So personally, I think Northern Storm needs a lot of love. I think it needs to be buffed for PvE use to be a proper DPS ultimate, but looks like they're coming after the other morph to bring that one down instead. For Fighters Guild, we have Dawnbreaker increased the cone size of this ultimate and its morphs to 135 degrees, up from 120, to help them land slightly more consistently to closer enemies and better align to their visual effects. So a small buff here for the size of Dawnbreaker. And then for Undaunted, the Radiate synergy, this is reduced by 20% now to ensure that its power is more in line with other synergies. I don't really love this since it does have that minimum range to activate, making it a little hard to consistently trigger. I don't know, I kind of think they should just go through and remove those minimum distance synergies. Those have always just felt really weird to me. Then we do have a fix for the Plentiful Harvest node in the champion point system. They fixed an issue where the first stage of this node did not properly grant a 10% chance to harvest double resources. So this one actually did carry up all the way into the 50% when you're maxed out. You are only getting 40% for all of this time since the new champion point system has been out. So yeah, it's probably good that they fixed that one. There's also some balance adjustments. We have Aegis Collar. This got the 3-piece bonus from Stamina Recovery changed over to Crit Chance. And then Azurblight Reaper got some bug fixes there. And Pillar of Nirn reduced the total damage of the set's proc by 22%, adjusted the 2-piece bonus to Crit Chance rather than max stamina. I also did a video already covering Pillar of Nirn. It's still a really good set, still one of the top tier sets in the game. Aegis Collar is right there with it. They're just used for different situations. People keep asking, you know, is Aegis Collar the replacement for Pillar of Nirn? Yes and no. For some situations it will be. For other situations it doesn't really work very well. So Pillar of Nirn is still going to be awesome. The damage nerf to it is not really that bad when you consider that it got the crit chance line added. So don't worry too much about Pillar. Don't feel like you have to decon it and all this crazy stuff. It's still a really good set. And finally, we have the biggest change of the patch, Invitation to Orsinium. Stuga has been re-recorded and has new voice acting. Her lines also received some revision as a result of getting a new actor in the studio, and Stuga is now relegated only to the stables in Shornhelm. Nothing personal, Stuga. But for real, I thought this was kind of weird that they re-recorded her lines all together. Anyone have any info about why they did that? Was there something going on with that original voice actor? I'm definitely curious, so let me know in the comments if any of you guys have some inside info on that. But that wraps up the Update 40 changes. Overall, I think this is going to be a really great update for ESO. The one area I really think they messed up on was the class sets. They ended up mostly okay, but I can think of so many interesting ways that the sets could have been handled, including not having them as 5-piece sets to add to the insane amount of those we already have in the game. I think 1-piece, 2-piece, and 3-piece should be focused on more and could have really added a lot of build diversity, whereas the 5-piece sets are already so saturated, and I think many people won't really care that much to farm most of the ones that were introduced. But hopefully those will be adjusted as time goes on, and if they are, I think this will be a home run of an update. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you all think about the Endless Archive update, and a big shout out to my current Patreon supporters and YouTube members. The contributions help a ton to keep the website and YouTube channel going. And a special thanks to Nicholas, Simon, Cougar's Bay and the Cougar City Guild, the Order of War Guild, Cantankerous Cat, Shady, Iffy, Blake1816, Mordecai1212, Santanico, Vidridi, Florian, Phoenix, Nalandia, Unemployed, Chris Eliana, Cha-Cha, Technical KO, Cap, Danco77, and Pletpron. Thanks again, and see you later. Bye. Those are annoying.
Yeah. And I'm just
Oh, jeez. I did 715k DPS to the dragon.
When you're finished here,